So if you caught my review of Kidding last week, you might remember that I had said by the third episode, that's really where I wanted the series to start kind of moving somewhere. Well, it did. So I have to say, I really enjoyed this episode. Every pain needs a name. Let me start off with some of the highlights, and then I'll get right to what it is that I really liked about this episode. First, the date scenes between Jeff and Shayna. I don't know. From the build-up, I was expecting it to be this nightmarish date sequence where she was this obsessive fan, and actually it turned out to be very nice and sweet, and I think it really built against my expectations. What I also thought was nice was that it showed that in certain areas Jeff really wants to maintain that separation between Mr. Pickles and Jeff. And I think his mindset being like, look, I've had such an impact on this woman's life. How can I project Jeff's problems onto this woman who sees me as Mr. Pickles and means so much to her life? I thought that was a really excellent sequence. And even, even that little nice part at the end where he could have just signed it Mr. P, but left it as Jeff, just to still give her that sense of like, look, I'm still a guy, but I'm Mr. Pickles, and I still want to stay Mr. Pickles for you. And I thought that was a very nice sequence throughout the episode. The Seb and Jeff, I think that's getting sadly heartbreaking, because I think with the conversations he's had with Jeff and the conversations he has with Deidre tonight, we see that Seb just finds it easier to deal with Jeff as Mr. Pickles because Mr. Pickles isn't a real person. He's somebody who Seb can relate to because he's a strange, odd character. In a weird way, Seb gets to project a lot of things he sees about Jeff onto Mr. Pickles, and it's safer. And we see that it's an easier persona for him to deal with. That Seb wants a son who can be like him, who is going to think like him, who's going to feel like him. And it's sad because it's Seb trying to be a father in the best way he knows how, but the best way he knows how is to be controlling and to really not want to deal with the truths of his children. And I think that really carried over in the interactions he had with Deidre, which is what he said to, just give Maddie a hug, and that sometimes is all a kid needs. And he sees that as being what fixes her, but what fixes her, sadly, quote unquote, is the typical Pickles family remedy, which is ignore the truth and it'll go away. And when Deidre says to Maddie, like, just don't ever talk to your father about what happened with Scott or his boyfriend. Sorry, Scott was a husband. What with his boyfriend? It's that heartbreaking thing of like, yeah, of course family matters matter when you're not talking about them. And I thought that was a very interesting dynamic, not just between Jeff and Seb, but I think also between Seb and Deidre. And it gives a little more, I think, a fleshing out of the problems that exist within the Pickles family, and just the way they're talking about animating and controlling Jeff when he just goes off the deep end that they feel. I think it's very heartbreaking because it's a family that doesn't know what to do with him, and they feel their only answer is to control him and do better by him. Meanwhile, both Seb and Deidre aren't exactly showing themselves to be the pinnacles of having their life together also. Will and Cassidy, his I think will soon to be girlfriend. I thought their dynamic was interesting. I like that we got a little insight into Phil, and Phil wasn't the angelic character he's been played out to be, and that Will kind of took some hits for Phil and some of the things that Phil would do. And I thought it was a nice and honest thing. It was like, I kind of missed that. And I really thought it all tied everything together. All of these things that I liked go into what I really loved about this episode, which is I feel like we have a sense of purpose, and this is moving forward. It sucks Jeff has a lot of forces that are working against him as he's trying to pull his life together, but I think he's starting to realize now that he's going to need aspects from both to get control back of his life, both personally and professionally. It doesn't look like his wife is going to be taking too well to how the episode ended, and I'll get to that in a second. And he's going to have to, in a lot of ways, push back against Seb and Deidre about the idea of taking control of the show and not basically being pushed out for puppets, guys in big mannequin heads, and cartoons. I really like the ending that Jeff, didn't sleep with the woman who was drunk in his hallway, but found a way to be both Jeff and Mr. Pickles by having sex with the cancer patient. Now, sadly, I think that's going to possibly screw with Jeff's head to next week's episode, but we'll worry about that for next week. All in all, I think this was a quality episode. It moved forward in the direction that I was wanting, and it really makes me interested in how the next 7 episodes are going to go. But major thumbs up on this one.